You just look at it in the city, or if you go to dinner, everyone's looking down at their phone, and I don't know. But you mentioned the UFO National Reporting Center run by Peter Davenport. That's an outstanding resource, outstanding organization. I would tend to trust their numbers more than other organizations. They do an outstanding job over there. So, it may be an uptick.
Yeah. Peter's been on my show, probably a dozen times or so. I can honestly say this: if you go up to any control tower in this country, when they pull their desks open for resources, to tell people when they call in and say, I saw a UFO, they're the first place that they tell people to call the National Reporting Center. So, I mean, that shows you when FAA tells people to do it, how credible it is. But, I think what's happened, because I've seen this in the 80s, and I saw it in the 90s, a lot of people, when they do see it, a UFO, or what have you, they're scared to go around telling people, because people would look at them like, this guy's a little bit off, that.
Agreed. Yep.
And now, I think because of people like Art Bell and some other shows in the past and current, like George, I mean, now people aren't as scared to sit there and say, well, I saw something, because they're not so worried about being labeled as a nutcase, to be blunt.
I would tend to agree with that. I recall I was discussing the exact same topic with Peter Robbins in Roswell, I think 3 or 4 years ago, and he was giving a presentation on the ridicule factor and how prevalent it was, or had been, in the past few decades. And you're right, because of the prevalence of paranormal-themed radio programs, podcasts, it seems that the ridicule factor is kind of backing off. It's still there, but people seem to be a little more comfortable discussing UFO topics. They're a little more comfortable coming forward with their sightings, with their events. And I think we might have turned a corner, hopefully. I'm not sure we have, but hopefully we have, where people are going to report what they're seeing in a much more straightforward manner, which would help researchers immensely, because they have a more complete set of data to look at, as opposed to wondering, we're getting 10 reports a month, how many are not being reported? Instead of wondering about that, getting more cases in is only a good thing. And going back to the testimony, people are seeing things and experiencing things that are really troubling them. It troubles their lives, especially when you talk about abductions. That if an individual is going through that emotional trauma and they have the ability to talk about it, talk it through, that's only a good thing for them. If they had the opportunity to discuss this openly and get it off their chest. So it's only a good thing that it seems that the ridicule factor is backing off. I agree with you wholeheartedly.
Well, I do, I noticed, with Terry Lovelace or Timothy Collin, and even Whitley, who was on our show here just recently, you can actually hear the trauma in their voice when they talk about it. That's the difference when you hear somebody who's being a hoaxer. You don't get that feeling from them. I tell you, people like Terry Lovelace, it has affected him so bad that he goes to bed at night with a flashlight next to him and a gun next to him, because he doesn't want to be abducted again. He's terrified of it. Whitley has changed his whole view of abductions now, where he feels that these aliens are trying to communicate with him. So that is a big change and a turnaround with him. But I tell you, it affects people emotionally for the rest of their life if they actually were abducted. Can you imagine, William, what you would be going through every day?
I cannot even imagine. No. Going back to your comment about being able to read their emotions, their body language, how they react, you're exactly right. I mean, I on several occasions, I've discussed the UFO topic with some individuals that I know, or they're bringing their case to me, their testimony. I'm copying it down and chronicling it. And we discussed the UFO topic, and I can recall 3 or 4 times in the past decade, the individual would say, Mr. Pullin, you've never seen a UFO, have you? I said, no, I haven't. Because they could tell in my voice I was very measured and objective and kind of clinical about it, just wanting to collect the data, as opposed to somebody who's seen a UFO, especially when you've experienced something a little more on a personal level, a close encounter of the third kind or past that stage. It's a personal experience It's traumatic. It's emotional. So I cannot imagine what that individual is going through. So when in my professional interactions with people like that, I'm very cautious and careful with them because they've already been traumatized. I try to make them feel comfortable, and if they want to discuss it, they'll discuss it at their own good time. You're exactly right. It affects them to a great degree. Their lives are changed by what's going on. Whether that event ultimately is UFO related or not, they have experienced something traumatic that they need to discuss, and at times they need help. They need some support, and researchers are there, should be there for them. It should give them an outlet to discuss these things. So, but I agree with you 100%. It's very traumatic for these people.
Oh, yeah, and it doesn't seem to go away. I mean, they could have been abducted in the 80s, and they still are traumatized. I mean, James, you're out there in the background. Didn't you notice that even with the last couple of guests that have claimed that they've been abducted, you could hear the anguish in their voices?
Oh, yeah, I can feel it. My goodness, you can feel it. Yeah, you can hear it. It. Some of them's afraid to even go to bed at night. It's in their mind. Is this one of the nights they're going to come get me against my will and do all kind of stuff and then try to scrub my brain and send me back? And then you get these memories that come back. And there's many of them that do that, and they got PTSD over it. And it's routinely over through the years, and then some of them got implants, and these all weigh heavy on their mind, and yeah, you could feel it and hear it in their voices big time.
Yeah, very personal, very, very emotional. Yeah, it's indescribable for somebody like myself who's never experienced anything UFO related. I can only imagine what they're going through. I mean, it manifests itself almost on a physical level. You can see the trauma you can hear it in their voice. You can see it in their face. You can see that they're clearly troubled by what has gone on. So any kind of ridicule or unprofessional behavior should be cast aside. They need to be approached cautiously, treated with the utmost caution and respect, because they're already in a emotional state of mind. The last thing they need is for they don't need to be given any grief. They don't need any ridicule. They need to be taken care of on some level. They should be respected and given the opportunity to discuss these things, which goes along with the idea that you were saying that it seems to be the ridicule is going away, and I would tend to agree. It seems to be more acceptable, more comfortable. It's more out there. It's on a societal level. It seems more comfortable and acceptable to talk about UFOs, which is completely different than it was even as short a time as 10 years ago. It's completely changed now.
Well, it has really changed a lot since the Navy came out. Now, they're not saying that these unidentified flying objects are from another solar system, a galaxy. They just said that, the unidentified flying objects doing things that we can't do, supposedly. I think since that's come out, a lot more people have come out of the closet. Well, I'm not going to use the word out of the closet. Well, I'm going to say it. Out of the closet.
You could, sure.
And are not as scared to talk about it. I'm sure you find that when you're doing what you do, that you probably get more people coming out and saying that they are seeing UFOs or had encounters of some sort, aren't you?
Yeah, very much so. Here in San Antonio, where I do most of my work, when I would have a public function, a meet and greet, or a festival, or a conference I was speaking at, I would get the occasional individual that would want to give me some testimony or fill out a sighting report, but it wasn't a lot. And the last 2 years, that's changed. Now I'm getting 10, 12 a day when there's a conference. Not every day, literally, but so the amount of interaction from individuals wanting to talk about their experience has gone up. Certainly what's going on the last 2 or 3 years has something to do with that. And the media is treating the UFO topic in a little more of a legitimate light, as opposed to the way it used to operate, say, before, in the last few decades. It was just horrible. It was always tongue-in-cheek. It was made fun of. It wasn't approached or discussed in a serious way. Now that's changed. So that seems to have made people more comfortable and more willing to discuss the UFO experiences. with researchers. And that's the only good thing, because we're looking for data, we're looking for evidence, we're looking for testimony that's firsthand, is grounded and credible, and we can't get it unless they tell us. We can't make them talk. But if they're comfortable to talk and more comfortable, which is the case, that's the only good thing. So it certainly seems to have turned a corner in that way.
William, what type of questions do you ask people when they contact you? If you were interviewing James or me about a UFO contact, or we seen one, what type of questions do you ask to narrow it down?
I don't ask them any questions. I give them a sighting report and I ask them, just tell me what you would like to tell me. Write it down. I never ask a question because I'm afraid I would lead them in a certain direction. I might taint their testimony. I might taint their thought process. I might motivate them to go a certain direction. No, I don't ask any questions. If they're going to approach me with their testimony, I give them a report or even just a sheet of paper and say, just communicate to me either verbally or in written form what you want to tell me. Well, your testimony, your data, what you remember, everything. But I don't. I make a point of not asking any questions, which is in my interactions with other researchers. I only know of 2 or 3 other people that do that. A lot of others will ask questions that are cautious, but it's very hard not to lead somebody.
Doesn't MUFON ask a bunch of questions?
I believe that's the way they do things. Don't quote me on that. I think they do. Yeah. I'm always worried about that because it's so easy to lead people in one direction. Like I would never ask, well, what does the craft look like? Well, that's assuming it was a craft. Or what kind of lights did it have? What color were the lights? That's assuming they had lights. That we can't make those assumptions. So it's better off, in my opinion, professionally, not to ask a question. Just give them the platform to discuss what they want to discuss, and they will meet you halfway. But asking questions, I'm very leery about that. So, but I think MUFON does ask quite a few questions in their signing forms. I might be incorrect on that, but I think that's what they do.
Well, the bad part is that if you're interviewing somebody, for example, and you start asking questions, and if they're not sure about it, they don't want to disappoint. Not saying everybody, but there's going to be a small percentage of people out there that will start answering things because they don't want to disappoint the interviewer. They don't want to look bad. So I hate to say it, people have a tendency sometimes to make things up. So I guess what you're saying, if you sit there and start asking questions, you're not going to maybe get totally, candid, honest answers then.
Yeah, in a way, you're right. I don't. One, from my angle, I don't want to give the illusion or the misconception that I have a bias. I don't. I just want to gather the data. I don't care what the data shows. I just want data. So I don't want to project my own thought process on them. And 2, I want them to meet me halfway. If they're willing to talk about their experience, then I'm good to go. I will chronicle that and go from there and investigate it as best I can. But I can't. I'm just not comfortable asking them questions because I might lead them in a certain direction, and then that would taint the testimony. And I mean, it's a very slippery slope. It's very difficult to ask or make inquiries of an individual that's experienced something UFO related without leading them in one direction or another. It's very difficult to not do that. Even professional hypnotists have a hard time not leading the subject with their questions. That's very difficult. And that's for a trained medical professional. For a layperson that's investigating UFOs, I would think it's even more difficult not to lead them. So I don't ask any questions at all. And that's just my personal approach to it, though. Everyone has different ways of doing this thing. So.
Okay, well, we need to take a break, and then we're going to have news on the top of the hour. So we have about a 7-minute break here. So if you want to get a cup of java, a cup of tea, or whatever, we'll be back with William Pullin talking about UFOs. You're listening to Night Dreams Talk Radio After Dark with me, Gary. We'll be right back after all this.